for all who are on the journey to discover the truths about their identity, history, culture, politics, spirituality, and family relationships. This is a show for the Black Freedom Movement and the Black Power generation and the hip-hop generation, including Black Lives Matter and associate activists, all of whom are seeking change. Dr. Obetashaka and his guest are dropping knowledge and insight from his successful organizing, research, writings, and innovative thoughts, the best of which have piped into God's mind to lift you up higher and higher. To the bosses, OGs, rappers, influencers, and those looking to evolve from the constraints of misinformation and miseducation to build a foundation for personal growth, love, and mental freedom. Check out the wisdom of the OR. Yeah, that's the original revolutionary, Oba T, who inspired 1 million black men with his rousing speech at the Million Man March, and who continues to fight, write, and speak the truth. Dr. Obetashaka is one of the deepest deep thinkers in the world today. A quote by Dr. Asa Hilliard. Dr. Obetashaka, then Bill Bradley, was the best leader organizer in the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE. An endorsement from Dr. George Wiley, Associate Director of National CORE and the best organizer blacks produced in the 1970s as the organizer of the National Welfare Rights Organization. The Dr. Obetashaka Show. Free your mind, and the rest will follow.
Greetings to all the viewers of the Dr. Obetashaka Show. How's everybody doing? Today we have a very special guest, my buddy. It puts a smile on my face when I see you, brother James Smalls. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, sir. How are you doing?
Looking sharp there, brother.
I'm trying to be like Obetashaka.
Think you're doing a good job. So today we're going to have a nice discussion on our spirituality. But before getting into that, I wanted to deal with two things, one of which is extremely important that we'll get into secondly. The first thing I wanted to do was to, again, thank all the viewers of the show for showing the interest you have and the dedication and the support and helping me out. Brother Ugawa has been one and many others as well. And I also want to thank people who have made contributions in the past to the show: Ronnie Gerard, Robin Hughes, Ujama Webster, Francine Leonard, Chastity, Leonard, Angela Houston, Steve McKenzie, Maurice Nelson, Wilson, Wilfred Dockett, Lucille Betoy, and LaShonda Henderson, Sister Robin, and I probably missed a few because I don't have the full list, but I want to thank you for your contributions. And those of you that have also decided to make a monthly contribution because it helps. This is being used to promote the show. So that's the purpose of that. Now, the main thing for this show today, one of the most important, we have a topic on African American spirituality, but Professor James Smalls is always on everybody's show, building shows. And I mean, some shows have literally grown because of Professor Smalls' involvement. And I hope you notice here under the banner, we put up his banner today. James is a major advisor to the Godfather of Harlem, and I binge watched that. And I see James Smalls all in it in certain themes, but he's politicized what would otherwise be a show on gangsterism and has injected politics and culture in it. And I just want to compliment you on that, brother. That, in fact, I can see sometimes where James even stuck himself in there when he puts the Geechee in. Because I binge watched because I had missed some of the shows. So I watched all of them.
Mhm.
And I don't watch a lot of these shows. The gangster things, I watch some of them, but you politicize that so much, bringing Malcolm in, Adam Clayton Powell in, and the culture in. And then you even had a Geechee club, and you've done other things. So he's a major consultant to this, and it got some top line actors in it. And there's a lot of truth. It's what you call historical fiction, but it's true. So I want to compliment you on that. You want to make any comments on that before we get into the important thing you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, there's some extraordinary writers, and the showrunner Chris Brancato, who I'll be meeting with when we finish, has been very good at getting in my head as I've been getting in his head, so that we can kind of like develop the idea of, even if I'm not there, they go like, what would Small say? You know, that kind of thing. But the writing staff has been extraordinary. Of course, Forrest Whitaker is just an extraordinary actor.
You better believe it. He's bad.
Oh, he's bad. Sister Elfinesh, who plays his wife, is just, I've never seen this lady miss a line, you know.
She's bad.
Antoinette, who plays the daughter. This is a fantastic cast. Giancarlo Esposito playing Dr. Powell. And then we have a new brother, Jason Caravel, playing Malcolm. Before that, it was Nigel Thatch. And both of them have done extraordinarily well. The idea of the thing was when the Harlem underworld meets the civil rights movement. That's the sub-theme. And so how do you create that? And that's what we've been trying to do. The other piece of it, the overriding theme is Bumpy Johnson, who is an African-American hero and folk hero in Harlem, as an underworld person in especially the numbers industry, who comes from the Gullah Geechee culture of Charleston, South Carolina, my home area. He's in prison for 11 years. And when he comes back home, he realized the white gangsters have taken Harlem. So the movie is about, how do I take it back for Black people? This is a Black thing. And so it's really Black nationalism in gangster form, right? It was ideal for me. And working with the young man who was a friend of Bumpy's granddaughter, Margaret. His name is Markel. What's Markel's last name? Now my brain goes. But Mark brings it to the table, and we were able to sell it to ABC and to Epic, MGM. And so it has some good storylines, some good message themes that deals with a lot of contemporary situations. And we try to make sure that we intersect with what is happening currently in the African-American community. And I think you've done a fairly good job at it.
It's masterful. And the way you weaved in the political themes with the gangster themes, and the way you politicize Bumpy and the brains and stuff, his chess playing in terms of strategy and how he out strategizes the mob. And there's a whole lot of truth in this in terms of how things actually worked with him and how it's worked with us in general. It's a statement on culture. And then the way you brought in that thing that you use for shaving. What do you call
the
this?
straight razor. Oh yeah,
Razor,
that's that was the tool of the Geechee man when he came north. He carried his straight razor.
Yeah,
I carried one when I was in high school, wrapped in the white kerchief with the tip sticking out of your back pocket. You know, it's a way to carry it to be safe.
And then when you see the classical thing where he uses the straight razor to slit the throat of one of these killing cops,
right?
That's masterful. And then owns up to some of this stuff later and gets away with it. Not with the cops, but in other things he does. It's just masterful. And then the way you weaved in Malcolm, Elijah Muhammad, the great Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, with actual historical themes, but it's fictionalized, but it's true. And
but
so
it's true.
for me, I mean, just watching that, it's classic acting, but within the background and the backdrop of African American culture. It's just plain ass beautiful. You know what I mean?
No, and there's a lot of history there, actual historical facts, especially when it comes to Adam Powell. Most people didn't realize he authored the Civil Rights Bill and the Voters' Rights Bill.
Mm.
But because he had the conflict legally at the time of the signing, they didn't invite him to the signing, which I thought was a crime in history. And so I wanted to make sure we put that forward. And in terms of the chess, you know, Bumpy actually beat Bobby Fischer twice.
No kidding.
He was a good chess player.
No
And
kidding.
and he studied poetry. No, listen, he went to Langston Hughes poetry classes, studied poetry under Langston Hughes.
Wow.
That's
And,
real.
and there's a piece where you have him counter rapping Muhammad Ali and,
Yeah.
you know, doing the whole poetry thing and on the spur of the moment, actually outdoing him in a certain way, or at least holding up to him. You know, it was just, it's magnificent. Absolutely. You know, along with Hoodlum, which Lawrence Fishburne plays in, where he brings out another side of this whole story, another master actor. This is classic stuff. And people have watched it. You should watch it because it's history as a novel. You know, it isn't, and it is.
Right. But you got to give credit to Chris Brancato, the showrunner and the chief writer, and his writing staff, in terms of how they interpret this whole process and bring it forward, and then have the integrity to call me or other African Americans. They have such a good research staff, looking at the history, looking at the culture. Someone would call me and said, "What picture should be on the wall of the restaurant, or the mosque in the Black community where they're having lunch, so that they can be as authentic as possible in making the presentation? So when our population see it, it's not an alien vision. You can say, yeah, I was in that restaurant. I was in 22 West. I was in mosque number 7.
Yeah.
And it's there, you know.
And then the piece that you got in, I know you got this one in, where the 3 civil rights workers, Cheney, Goodwin, and Schwerner, all 3 of CORE, had been murdered, and during the Mississippi Summer Campaign in '64, and then you got the mafia coming in to get the information on where the bodies were. Now, of course, that never happened. But the point is, it allowed you to put a historical context in this in terms of the civil rights or Black freedom movement, and go into it in some detail. So there's a lot of ways in which you've taken liberty to bring in historical facts.
Right. Well, I give the credit of that to a brother from California on your home, Paul Eckstein. Was a brother that Paul and Chris, and then I became a part of that, and we kind of fashioned it, and it worked. I mean, people were calling me, "Did that really happen?" Was that, you know, if it didn't happen, it should have happened. You know, that kind of thing.
No. In fact, the murderers of those 3 civil rights workers, the Sheriff Rainey, he's walking around in broad daylight, got, you know, let off and everything else. But the fact of the matter is that happened, and so it allowed you to bring that particular piece of history out. So it was quite good. I mean, the whole thing. But I'm saying that to say that you have really used your background in consciousness to do a lot of different things in terms of raising the consciousness of our people, especially young people. And you and I go back a long way, and I just have a lot of respect for you, James. I really love you.
And I used her, and I'm wearing your gift. And everywhere I go, everyone looked at the string. And one of the young actresses in the scene, Antoinette, came out from a scene, and she just focused and couldn't move. And so I said, "You got to call Baba over to Shaka to find out what this ring means, because I don't know what it means." But it's an extraordinary gift from my brother. Many years ago, we were in Senegal. And so I wear this as my signature piece. And everybody's intrigued by this design. I remember when you were sitting at that bar drawing this design. You know, I think Wade Noble was for this, and you were designing it for the artisans to make it for you. So it's an extraordinary piece.
Well, it's an expression of my love for you, because when you see a brother who's done as much as you've done, and I saw that. I don't see you wearing jewelry. I know you're not a jewelry person, but you
Mm.
like it. So I said, I got to give this one up. This goes to you. You know what I mean? And so I'm appreciative of that. And this promotional that we have here for the show, that's me and James Smalls at the Pan-African Congress, African Scholars Conference in 2004 in Senegal that he just referred to.
Right.
Sponsored by President Wad, but it was who allowed it to happen, but it was the African Union that brought it on, and it was Gaddafi that paid for it along with the government of Nigeria. And so, we had a chance to do some stuff there in terms of pushing some stuff for African people at that time. And I was honored to chair the political committee, Pan-Africanism in the 20th Century, the only African outside of Africa to, chair one. And so Smalls and I, this picture here, this is a reception that we attended for all the delegates, and Miriam Makeba sang for this reception.
Yes.
And Wally Soyinka chewed out African heads of state. He's a Nobel Prize laureate from Nigeria. He chewed them out for their corruption. He was right there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite a historical thing. But to have Miriam Makeba with her bad self, because she wasn't just an entertainer, she's a great worker for African liberation. That was an honor in and of itself. And I think Mandela was piped in verbally, to make comments. So it was our chance to interface, as you've had, and I've had opportunities with the African Union to try and put some pressure on them to get some representation of Africans in the U.S. and in the diaspora, because we had Africans from all over the world there, and that our issues be addressed as we've addressed theirs. So it was a very good thing. And you see the smile I have on my face here? That's because I'm with James Smalls. You see that smile? Huh?
Yeah, we were having a good time at that conference. We did a lot. We influenced a lot of the committees, a lot of the workshop. And I think our work led to this coming about of the 6th region because of those discussions.
Yeah, right.
That took place.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so so let's get into this. So that background, I just had to bring in the Godfathers of Harlem. That's beyond bad. So the next show is going to start when?
In January. We'll be finished shooting mid-October, editing and all of that stuff getting through. I think the first week in January, there's another 10 episodes that's going to literally blow your mind. In this episode, of course, Malcolm will be assassinated. But what you're going to see is the role of the FBI, the role of the CIA. You're going to see his relationship with Che Guevara. You're going to see his trip to Mecca. You're going to see his trip to Egypt and Ghana. We've got all of that there. You're going to see his invitation from Ahmed Ben Bella to be invited to speak to address the non-aligned nations, stuff that people have not put forward in making points on Malcolm.
Right.
So we're bringing it home to, when you look at the work of Zach Kondo and his book on Malcolm's assassination, we're looking at the role of the FBI, the CIA, the New York Police Department, as well as others in assassinating this extraordinary leader or creating the environment in which he was assassinated. But at the same time, not making so much focusing on the assassination, let's look at the reaction of the peoples of the world to this assassination. All right. And how do people say, we're not going to let you fall, Malcolm. We're not going to let you die, Malcolm. 56 years later, he's as contemporary as he was 56 years ago.
Right on.
If not more so.
Right on. Yeah.
And you've written extraordinarily on him as well. And so,
And the actors you've had, I haven't seen the new one, but the actor you've had so far playing Malcolm, he looks like him. He's got his mannerisms. I mean, the whole thing, it's authentic. And same with the messenger, that person takes on his persona. So
that was Clifton Davis.
Okay.
It's Clifton.
Okay.
I hadn't seen Clifton in almost 40 years when he came to do that piece. But he did an excellent job.
Sure did.
Excellent job on The Messenger. And the young man, Nigel Thatch, who played Malcolm in this piece on Selma, is the one that everybody saw. And we worked together almost every day. I watched every scene he would shoot. Matter of fact, he would not shoot the scene unless I was standing there, so I can be his critic.
Mhm.
And we had fun doing that. The young man who has replaced him for this last episodes, um, brother Jason Carval, looks like Malcolm's twin.
Mm.
And he has come into the Malcolm spirit. It's almost like Malcolm can possess you, you know.
Yeah.
And you saw that with Nigel. There was one day Malcolm's nephew was with me on the set, and he saw Nigel performing, and he had to walk away and start crying because the boy was his uncle for that moment.
Mm.
He just captured that spirit, and Jason has begun to do the same thing. He's found. And I noticed in watching Forrest Whitaker works, how when he first took on the role, I asked him, how is a nice guy like you going to play a gangster? But one day he walked in and you realize he had captured the spirit of Bumpy Johnson. And he could become Bumpy Johnson at
Mm.
will.
Mhm.
And so to watch these extraordinary young people work, you know,
Yeah, and the way you've weaved in the politics with the gangsterism, you humanize them because you're showing this isn't just an evil gangster. You know what I mean? Now this is a complex figure. One of the reasons that he's doing what he's doing is America, but I'm not blaming it all on America. But the fact is, you're showing the political side. You're showing the intellectual side. You're showing the family side. It's complexity. You know what I mean? It's not just black and white. Nuance.
Right.
And then that droopy eye that Forrest Whitaker has, that works to his advantage in acting. You know what I mean? He uses every asset that he's got. I mean,
Yes.
masterful.
The man is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And
Yeah.
most people don't know, next Tuesday, his foundation is having their annual fundraiser, right? What is he fundraising for? The refugee camp he runs in Uganda, and the refugee camps he runs in Southern Sudan, and the refugee camp he runs in Colombia,
Mm.
and the program he has in the LA school system for Black males.
Mm.
And people don't know that he does this kind of work outside of being on the screen.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
extraordinary young man.
Beautiful. So let's get into a major purpose for you being on today. You had called me and told me I didn't know that you were in any way connected to the massive fire, one of many fires that's occurred in California. And this one's in Weeds, California, Weeds, Weeds. And I was thinking, oh, there ain't no black people there. That was what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And then you call and tell me the impact that this had on black people living there. We care about everybody who's suffering, but
Right.
often few people care about us. And so you were telling me about this, and so I said, yeah, we need to have you on because people need to show some support for this. So could you explain what happened and what particularly happened to black folks there?
Yes, sir. On the 2nd of what are we in September? I was actually on set and I turned on my phone and someone had a friend from 50 years ago sent me something saying weed is gone. So I'm saying, why would somebody joke about something like this? So I finally got a break to call back. And she said, has you called your brother? I said, no. She said, most of Lincoln Heights, which is the black community in weed, is burned to the ground this afternoon. So my head went crazy. I get on the phone. I can't reach my brother. I reach my nephew, who's the minister of the Baptist church there, the Mount Shasta Baptist Church. And he tells me, Uncle James, about 100 homes out of 110 homes is gone.
Mm.
You know, in almost a flash. And it wasn't the forest fire that did this. There's a massive sawmill complex that's there. And that's why so many African Americans went out there in the 20s and 30s to work and build their families there, because it was a lucrative employment environment. And this old mill had been closed for, I guess, years. I actually worked in there in 1968. I worked in the planing mill. In 1972, I worked in that same building. My younger brother lives up there. My eldest brother lives just up the hill. And a fire occurred in this building, and the thing blew up midday. It was no workers in there. So whatever they stored in the facility caused this explosion, and it just scattered embers in the air, but a 25-mile-an-hour wind, but everything being dry, as you know, out on the West Coast at the time. And within minutes, the entire community was on fire. And it was just by the grace of God and the ancestors that we saved most of the people. We lost 3 people. One was my cousin, Sister Marilyn. Her husband is still fighting his severe burns in the hospital. Another was a beautiful Filipina sister who lived just down the hill from us. She made it as far as her car and was overtaken by the smoke. And then they found the child, a 10-year-old, in the rubble. But it destroyed the houses going right across into an area called Lake Shastina, which is one of the exclusive areas, because there's a college there, a very big junior college called the College of the Siskiyous. And I attended school at that college. Most people, because I'm a Geechee from South Carolina, well, California was my second home. My family moved out there in 58 parts of them. And so I've been back and forth living there through the years. And so we've got over 1,000 people that's homeless now. It isn't like they can go back to their house, because the house is not there anymore. It's gone. And so they're all living in motels at this point, except a few whose families have come up from Sacramento and other places and retrieved them. The majority of people are still in motels and will be until they can sort things out. I've heard that the company ownership have come forward and had a meeting, I think, on Thursday. I haven't heard the feedback on that meeting. That company have been there for years. I worked for them when I was there. And so we, in the meantime, under the leadership of my nephew, Reverend Alonzo Green, we have been raising. There is a GoFundMe. I did send that to your email as well, but whatever comes to my Cash App, I can transfer to the GoFundMe. And we're looking forward to a point where they begin to find housing for the people temporarily, because they'll need everything. I mean, people got out with just their lives. I'll just tell you one incident. There was a construction worker and his crew going down the highway, I-5, and they see the fire, and they go in because this whole place is ablaze, and they go in to see if they can help. And they managed to get to a lady who was just sitting there because her son was overweight and couldn't get out of bed. And so she resigned herself, I'm going to die here with my child. They went in and was able to take the young man, put him on the flatbed truck, take the lady out, and down the block, go in another house and save a 10-year-old girl who was home alone, but was too frightened to come out of the house into the fire. So you hear those kinds of heroism throughout that day, that people from everywhere just driving on the highway and ran in to help, and other community members going and getting people out of house to house, because many of the people were elderly and was unable to save themselves. So, good. You got to go fund me up there. That's very good. And so this community has been there since, I think, the town was founded in 1906, Weed, as a lumber town. The Black community has been there since about 1912. You understand? And these were people from Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, who had been working in the lumber industry there for a company called International Paper. So they moved a lot of those people up there. Many just came because one family member found that there's a lucrative job market and wrote home to pack up the car and come. we've got a place, we can make money, we can build homes. So these homes that was destroyed were intergenerational Black homes that was built in the 20s and the 30s.
Mm.
You know.
Mm.
So, and I'm happy that my people have said, we're not going to give up our land and our community. We will rebuild Lincoln Heights.
Good.
And they've vowed that that's what they're going to do. I've lived in this community. This is my people's. This is my community. I know how strong they are. We were like, this was an African village. And it was one of those extraordinary towns for being in the North that close. We're like an hour and 30 minutes out of Oregon. So we're way up there at the foot of Mount Shasta. And yet it was a fully integrated town from its inception. They did not have separate school systems or separate hospitals. Or it was, and I found that difficult for me to live in. The 60s, I kept leaving. Yeah. I couldn't fathom living in that environment because I was fighting a war because of the segregated conditions in the country. But extraordinary people, and the people of Weed, both white and Latinos, have come forward to assist the Black community in an extraordinary way. You know, so kudos to that community that have always come together in that way when there was trouble, but they certainly have stood up as a community. And, you know, anytime I'm on my little ones always pop in the door. So my granddaughter and grandchildren just popped in the door and they waved to Bubba over to you.
Hey, how you doing, brother?
Yeah. And then my angel girl, she's waving. So it's good to see them. They're back in school now. They just got back into school.
How many grandchildren you have?
Close to 23. And then their mama, my daughter, she can't squeeze in between the tables. So I'll say, don't try it, baby. Okay.
I know, you're gonna be downstairs.
Okay. They're going off to a wedding of a family member, which I won't make. But that's my world. My world is built around the family. It's built around those babies. They were born in this house, raised in this house. They have their own home down the street now. But this is their home.
Right on. Right on. Yeah, so what we're encouraging people to do, and I replaced our little thing for donations, is to donate to this Cash App fund. You have it listed right here. https://www.gofundme.com/f/historic Lincoln Heights, blah, blah. You see it, emergency fund. Make the donations there. I'm going to make a $500 donation to this. And I would ask other people to do the same thing. And James is all over the place, giving people information free, and building shows up and everything else. And so it's rare you're going to see him coming on asking for anything associated with him. And this is bigger than him, his family, but it's the community. And so we owe it. Put some money up. Put your money where your mouth is. Donate it to this GoFundMe relief for Weed, California. You know what I mean? And this is a history we don't know. We're all over the place, all over the country.
And there's actually 3 other Black communities up there. Weed is on the northern side of the mountain. Okay. That's the largest of the Black community. McLeod is on the eastern side of the mountain. That's another Black community. Dunsmuir is the southern side of Mount Shasta, another Black community is there. And then the town of Mount Shasta itself on the western side of the mountain, which have the second largest Black community.
Wow.
And so, and we all interacted, you know, those 4 communities always interacted almost as one community, as long as they've been there. And it's just a phenomenal thing that these Black people could, and that junior college in the town united and built that college for their children. And most of the kids leave there and go to Chico State or UC Davis. And
3 minutes.
Managed to send probably multiple generations on to college, you know. I mean, if you can understand, when I was 21 years old, right, and I'm working in that same building that exploded over T, I'm pulling off the green chain. If people don't know what the green chain is in a lumber mill, that's when you uh, peel the big tree, but it's soaking wet with sap, so it is heavy. In '68, I'm making $19 an hour.
Yeah, that's good money then.
Very good money. And we were the kids, right? And
Mhm.
so the oldest were making more money than that. So that tells you what kind of environment those people had created for themselves, and in terms of the community they created for themselves, and so forth. And
Yeah, these communities are really beautiful. They're in nature and stuff like
yeah,
that.
oh,
Very
the
beautiful.
water we drank was the melted snow off of the mountain.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
an extraordinary place, extraordinary people. Anyone who's ever gone up the weed rarely wanted to leave,
Yeah.
because the people was that kind of African hospitable.
Mhm.
In terms of, this was the community out of Louisiana. They brought Louisiana with them. They brought Texas with them. They brought Mississippi with them. They brought the Delta with them.
Mhm.
The gumbo and weed would challenge anything in New Orleans. Okay, so, and that was one of the main dishes. And I remember in '68, me and my brother and my sister-in-law, we put together the first African Day, right, in the park. And I was the only guy there who could tie a gaily. So I had to tie all the women hair. Right? My mother sent the cloths out from New York, and we dressed every woman in the town that wanted to dress up, and that was most of the town. And that was something they continue every year after that. So
Yeah,
it's
you're quite versatile. I didn't know you lived in weeds. You know what I mean?
yeah. I would come down to Oakland. You remember the Afro American Association,
Oh yeah.
Donald Warden, El
Mhm.
Mansour later. We would come down and meet at that church. I forgot the name of this church in Oakland, but they would meet. We would drive down. We would come down for some party events and other things. My brother was very active in the core movement. Even though he wasn't in core, he was like the de facto leader. He still is. He's 84 years old now, going on 64, because
Mhm.
he's a lumberjack. And they're in better shape than me, and probably you, from working in that forest.
Mhm.
But he was always my guardian brother. In a big family. My mother had 13 kids, so each one of the older kids took care of a younger child, and
Mhm.
he was one that was my guardian.
What was his name?
His name is Andrew Green.
Okay, right on, right on. Okay, so people make a donation to support people on the fire relief for weeds. It's listed up here. Make that donation and encourage other people to as well, and get the information out on what's happened there. And of course, this is a part of global warming. And in this particular case, this is a Black community that's embedded in a white community, but very often we're the victims of this on a greater level because of environmental racism
Mm-hmm.
add on top of everything else. So what we have to do is do what we can to give our people support. So we're going to get into topics. So since James called me for this, I says, "Hey James, let's have a little discussion on African American spirituality." And I
Right.
know this is one of many of the topics, but probably one that's closest to James' heart. And so, today we're just going to have a little discussion on African and African American spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, I wanted to put up a clip that should remind James of some stuff that comes out of his own hometown. And it's the McIntosh County Shouters. And these are people who come from the Gula Geechee background, and they're doing some stuff that goes straight back to Africa and the spirituality. And this is
The
the ring
McIntosh
shout.
County Shouters perform ring shouts and sing songs that Negro slaves were singing when they arrived by ship in Virginia in the 1700s. Songs were given to us at birth. We will sing them for all they are worth. The McIntosh County Shouters have been performing the authentic ring shout publicly for almost 30 years. Several of the original shouters are now deceased, but their children and grandchildren are perpetuating the legacy. It is of utmost importance to each member of this group to accurately educate the audiences while providing a unique and entertaining performance. We have noticed that when some people hear that the McIntosh County Shouters are performing, and performing in common clothes such as cotton dresses and overalls, they often turn up their noses and feel that we lack sophistication. We are here to let you know that sophistication is neither worn on backs nor bought in stores. Sophistication is cultivated and developed. It is the philosophy of the McIntosh County Shouters that you have to know where you came from before you know where you're going. The more you know about the old, and the more you will understand and appreciate the new or the modern. So sit back, relax, and enjoy a trip back to the past. Feel the rhythm, and please join in clapping. When the slaves were brought here from their native land in Africa, they were treated very, very badly. They were kept in chains and fed from troughs like hogs. They were forced to eat on their hands and knees. But there was a bond that existed among the slaves. We believe that the slave John was being punished, and the others could not bear to hear him groan. This song was sung to express their empathy. John on the island, and I heard him groan.
Eli, yeah, Lord. Eli, I can Lord, I heard him groan. Eli, I can Eli, oh Lord. Eli, I can Eli, I can Eli, I can
Yeah, that's good. You can cut it.
Yes. Well, what you just saw, first let me just correct something that people do. Not that they just did, but most people put the emphasis on the islands because that's where the whites have put the emphasis on our cultural survival. But that culture survival on the coast from Wilmington, North Carolina, all the way down to Gainesville, Florida. Okay, and the largest population is mainland, though the isolated islands off of the coast of Georgia and South Carolina does have some very strong retentions. What you just saw, the stick and the clapping, that's the drums. Remember, they took our drums away after the Stoner Rebellion, and we were forbidden to use drums. But we continued to do drumming. So what you were seeing, that was those men, they were the drummers. And the ladies were the dancers. Normally in Africa, there's a tree in the center of that dance. That dance is done around a tree. And almost every community in West Africa, there is a tree. That's where the major meetings take place. That's where the major spiritual events took place. Because we didn't have a building like a church. The universe was our building. Our church canopy was the sky. So our spiritual events was done in nature. And always at the core of that event was a tree. So thus you get the circle. If you watch the foot movements, those are the ethnic dances of whatever community that particular population came from. If you go into the church, especially the Baptist church, which runs all up and down that coast, and the AME church, which came in later, contrary to history, the Baptist church was formed in 1749, before the 1749, before the AME church in Savannah, Georgia, as a place of refuge and retention of African culture. And so you'll see very much the ethnic dancers. You can go to any community, film the footsteps of the shouting in the churches, and go to Africa and find that ethnic group based on the footstep and the clap rhythm, which are the drum rhythms that they brought with them. And I found out this by accident, Oba. I'm in Ghana. Matter of fact, I just left Asa and his grandchild, and I'm going to buy a drum for one of my grandchildren. But it's Friday, so it's Juma. The guys, all the merchants there, making prayer. So I'm going through the drum, me and the brother who's my guide, and I'm playing some of them, right? So the only thing I can remember is a rhythm from the church, because I'm not a drummer. But there was one rhythm that you hear every Sunday, and it vibrates all through the trees. So I'm playing this on the drum, and it was sounding good. I thought, oh, I'm sounding like a real drummer. And these men came running with sticks and bricks heading for me. So I panicked. I thought maybe they thought I shouldn't have touched the thing, or maybe I was stealing it. But my guide ran to them and stopped them and said, no, he's just, he wants to buy a drum. And he asked them, why are y'all reacting in that way? The rhythm that I was playing, that I heard coming from my church, St. Anne's Baptist, every Sunday, a clap rhythm, was a distress call for help. Well, that blew me away, and it really opened my minds up to the degree of African retentions in African American culture, especially hidden in the music, is greater than anybody imagined. Okay. And even our dancers, we play the jitterbug like a joke, but those were African dances with a Western twist, I called it. Those footsteps, those movements, when you study the footsteps and movement, and people say, well, why you say the church? Because the church was the only sanctuary where we could safely act like Africans one day a week without anybody necessarily bothering us, even though we had to disguise it. We call it shouting. And when I was taken into the church as a member of the church, at 13, everybody in my community that year, and some who are old enough will remember this, all the kids in the community who was 13 that year is rounded up. That's the African age group that Jomo Kenyatta writes about in Facing Mount Kenya. Okay? And we were put through a training for 12 months under leaders from the community. My leader was Deacon Sam Keith, who became my surrogate father. That was my African uncle, right? And so at the end of the 12 months, we went to the moaning bench, meaning we went through an initiation process, a spiritual initiation process, where we had to get on our knees on a bench with our eyes closed tightly, and our family sung their own special spiritual song and dance over us. You could only leave that bench if you got possessed. You couldn't fake it because the deacons, they were there to check you, make sure you weren't pulling a fake. And if you didn't get the Holy Ghost, what they call it, or get possessed, then you lost your place in your age group and you had to come with another age group next year and you'd be out of place. I didn't understand all of that until I read Facing My Kenya, and it goes, oh my God, I went through this. And when I went through my Yoruba initiation, I went through a similar thing. And it was like, we didn't lose it. We disguised it and we hid it, mostly in the church, mostly in our music, mostly in our dance, mostly in our linguistic attitude.
Right.
Black folks speak English with a different kind of attitude. We
Niger,
speak English with a different kind of grammar structure.
Niger, Congo, Bantu linguistic structure. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Now, what you're going through is, starting with this Baptist church, is that Blacks didn't embrace what's called Christianity until the end of slavery. Very few
Right.
took it on during slavery. Why? Because it was oppressive, and
Right.
We had our own spirit system. But what we took on when we dropped it into what we called the church, we dropped our culture, which was a culture of over 240 odd years of practice. It could be called voodoo, and that gets dropped into the church. And why do we pick Baptists and Methodists? Because that was closest to African culture, meaning you could pick your leaders because our culture is democratic.
Right.
You could freely express the spirit.
Right.
You know, you could do all the other things that were involved in the culture. And so these Blacks who start this, they're not Christians at all. And it's voodoo. And then what happens is, over time, there's a little stuff that gets altered. But the fundamentals, the reason the Black church is different from the white church is it's Africa, baby. And the second thing, the ring shout. That ring shout dance. I was talking to Theophilo Benga. All over Africa, they do that same dance.
All over.
Yeah, counterclockwise shuffle. You note those women, their feet never left the ground, and it's counterclockwise. Why? This starts with the twa. This is the motion of the stars and the planets. They're elliptical. It's actually a spiral dance. And so the twa would say, by singing and by dancing, we're harmonizing human beings, Mother Nature, with the cosmos. And then, as I pointed out to you before, the great healer of the Lakota people, Fool's Crow, he says, God's a sucker for music. God loves music.
I like that.
God's a great force. And when God hears particularly great forces coming from voices and movement and dance and stuff, then God perks up. You hear me? So the ring shout, the counterclockwise dance was a thing coming from all over Africa, and all Africans practiced this. And so the spirituals were always sung while dancing and while doing this shuffle. And then note with the McIntosh County singers, I don't know if you noticed it, they sing in the same dialect as West Africa. So when you're hearing those spirituals, it's kind of like if you've ever heard any West African who comes here and speaks English, they have a special kind of accent. That accent is the Niger-Congo Bantu speech pattern that Blacks still speak. 80% of Black people speak. So the spirituals were sung that way. You know what I mean? So what you're seeing here is not a carryover, not a retention, because these are deep structure that is deep into us. And there's a whole bunch of things that we carried and continue, as opposed to pieces and scraps. This is the core of it. So that's why I thought you would like seeing this, because this
I lived in it. I grew up in it. I'm from Georgetown, South Carolina, in the rural area. I grew up in an African village. My grandmother was Miss Pigeon. She was the chief priestess. She was the primary root woman for our area. So I lived that. We helped her gather her herbs and her healing potions. She would never bathe when she went to our house to heal, even if she had to stay there a week. She didn't bathe in that house. We would have to take water in a bucket from our house, and she would bathe in the back, in the woods, whatever, where she had privacy. She would not eat at the place she went to heal. We would bring food from our house, the children, to her, and so forth. So to live with a grandmother who was a root woman, who, when I went away to join OAU, I remember the prayer she said over me when she put my head between her legs, and she told me that no one could kill me. She told me that if I didn't allow them to put it through my mouth, when she had fixed me, that's what they call it, fixing you.
Mm.
She had fixed me so nothing could harm me. You understand?
Mm.
And so I left home with that understanding. That was the lady who told me the first time I heard the word Africa was from her telling us where we were from.
Mm.
Her father had come from Africa, from the area that we now call Uganda. He was a Tutsi. Her mother came from Sierra Leone. She was Mendi. And so Mama was the first generation born here. I'm the third generation born here.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. One of your points about you were going through initiation in the Baptist church and the moaning bench and all of this are part of the institutions of spirit possession, bringing the spirit down. And
Mhm.
then if you look at the slave narratives, you'll see where enslaved Africans would sometimes, at the end of slavery, they're going to school. And some of these kids, when they come in at Monday morning, they can hardly concentrate. Why? Because in the weekend, the people had been taking them to graveyards. And in these graveyards, they've been communing with spirits and staying there for 2 and 3 nights until they experience the same thing you were talking about with the Wailing Bench, spirit possession. So these were all things that were African institutions being dropped in whatever institutions we created to see that these children would be initiated into knowing who they are, that they're Africans. You know what I mean? This is some heavy stuff, you know?
Yeah. And we would the other things we would do certain times a year, we would clean the cemetery. You know, in Ghana, that's called a Kwesidae. Every 6 weeks, you should attend to your ancestors. And then once a year, you have bigger Kwesidae, where everybody go and clean the major cemeteries, take the brushes and the straw and the leaves off and make it look pretty. And I forgot a sister who wrote a book. She used to work with Dr. Shashi McIntyre, and she did much of her work in South Carolina about the graves, the decoration of graves. And so she was able to tell which were the Congolese, which were the Akans, which were the Yoruba or Igbo, based on what was on that grave. Like on many of the graves, you saw the dishes of the people. You saw the pots. Depending on the craft, they were in, the tools were there. And you'd have to clean them up every year and make them nice. And then part of the family was from the indigenous Africans who was here. So they buried in mounds, little hills. And we'd have to go and clean with Papa. We'd clean, that was Papa's side of the people. And we would clean the mounds. And, you know, people say Indians, and we said Indian then too, because we didn't understand we were the African predecessors. And so, but we still clean their graveyards. They're still there right this minute. Now that the anthropologists and archaeologists from the cities have come in, they're telling us we can't go to our own people's grave mounds to clean them. And so, but we still insist, and some of our people still go.
Now, part of this that you're talking about, the cleansing of things, this goes back all over Africa, and it's called cult. And we'll often think cult as, you know, some brainwashing group that you get into. No, it's cultivating.
Yes.
So in ancient Kemet, a spirit would reside inside of a particular statue. And it could be any of the netters of ancient Kemet.
Right.
And then once or twice a year, they would bring those out for the community. But during the time in which they're inside of a temple, the priest is cleansing them so that they're purified, so that the spirit that's inside of a particular object, it could be a carving or whatever, can operate appropriately. And then all of the celebration that occurred later that we find in the Black church, you know, such as praise worship, that's done when this is brought into the community and people shout, dance, play drums, and praise. And that, again, that's intrinsic to Black worship practice to this day. That's African. And a lot of blacks don't know where it comes from. So they'll quote some little unknown passage in the Bible. Well,
Right.
whites have the same passage. They don't do that. That's not their form of worship. That's your African spirit, because you have to draw the spirit down by praising it, singing, dancing, shouting. So this is all basic to our culture. African as you get. You know what I mean?
I don't know how much time do we have? Yeah.
Time you got left?
Well, I'm
about 20 minutes. 20
okay.
minutes, okay.
I noticed my writing partner has been calling me, but we'll finish what we got to do.
Okay.
The one thing that I think people should also appreciate when they see the African culture as it manifests, when we start learning how to look for it, see, when we study Africa, it allows you to see the Africa that's been with you all the time.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and one of the things we look when, especially when you look at South Carolina, you see Congo, you see Angola, you see Madagascar, you see Cameroon, you see Sierra Leone, you see the amalgamation, and they didn't have to amalgamate because African culture is not as different as people think it is.
Exactly.
Ecology and environment determine the kinds of tools you use, but the fundamental philosophical understanding of universe and nature is the same. And so you watch all of these varied communities from Africa amalgamated into the African American and produce an extraordinary culture that no one dare calls African because it's so fundamentally African.
Right.
At its core.
And spirit is so central to all of it. Like your comment is, if it doesn't feel right, my spirit don't like it. That's you. Or the average black person, the spirit said this to me. You know what I mean? And that's common. That's common discourse every day. I mean, I'm doing my feet, so I get some, work on my feet, and it's all sisters in there. Well, baby, the spirit said this, and the blah blah blah, and they ain't talking about the church. They just talking about everyday life. You know what I mean?
And let me tell you about some other forces, because we brought our deities with us. There was Papa, my grandfather, my mother's father, whose house I grew up in, would tell us about the Plat Eyes. Now, how many people ever heard of the Plat Eyes? You know?
Yeah.
The Plat Eyes are spirits that roam the forest at nights. These are spirits who have not found peace yet. And so they're still roaming the roads. And so we were always warned not to go out on the roads at night without an elder with us. And that elder would always carry a hickory stick with a silver dollar embedded in the top. Because only that hickory stick and that silver dollar could fight off the Plat Eyes. You know, when we were children, we didn't know. We believed the Plat Eyes was as real as touching your own flesh. Now I know that the Plat Eyes are real, because there was a period where I thought, well, oh, that was just popping them superstitious. Then I learned African culture and realized, oh my God, they were other forces in and about our lives, and they know how to handle them. You know? And I remember one night Papa tells a story about this particular Plat Eye that bothered him every night he walked home, and he had to come through the back by the church. And so this night he's walking, and this Plat Eye is a bird, it's black dark, but he's got his hickory stick. And the Plat Eye was a bird and kept flying around. And so he would shush the bird away, and the bird would go, and when he got near the corner, it was a bull standing in the middle of the road. He ain't about to let him by. So he took on this bull because he knew it was a Plat Eye. He knew it was a spirit. So he took it on with his hickory stick. And him and that bull, they fought, and they tell you the stories. He fought with that bull for about 2 or 3 hours. It was only 5 minutes, but he fought with the bull, and the bull ran off in the bush, and he made it home. So the next day he went back to see if maybe he injured the thing, and he found a dead bird side the road. And I never quite got the story about why he found a dead bird, but I think the dead bird represents the point that there was a spirit, and it had possessed something, and he had to fight that living body that contained that spirit that was interfering with his journey. I mean, that's the kind of story we heard every day. Or the Barabbas story that taught us, like my mama used to teach us every night before we went to bed, we had to hear the stories. Everybody gathered in a circle around Ning, and that was my mom. And she would tell us these stories. One of the Burr Rabbit story I didn't figure out till later had to do with greed, and it was the candy tree. And so the elders would let you go in the candy tree, but you were told only to eat a certain amount of candy. Then you had to come out at a certain time and go to bed. Well, Barabbas went in the tree and he decided he's going to get greedy, and he overate. And the belly was too big, so he couldn't come out of the tree, and it was nighttime, so now he can't get back home in time. I forgot the rest of the story, but I remember that much because we would get them every night. They kept their folklore. They kept their ethical, moral traditions and stories and metaphors, and they taught us that as children.
Yeah, and Brer Rabbit was especially suitable for us here. Nancy the Spider, more for the Caribbean.
Right.
But Brer Rabbit, where you're up against this white boy every day, you're out foxing him, you know?
Right.
And it's like the Godfather of Harlem, you know, him out playing best master gone. And so the fox is a white boy. Brer Rabbit is just a little rabbit, and he engages in him with brain power. And that brain power overcomes him. So yeah, that story. And then Brer Rabbit can be High John the Conqueror because he can be hidden. And that's the warrior spirit. So you don't know who's coming at you laughing and grinning. And then the next minute, staging a revolt, poisoning you, doing something else rebellious. You don't know. You know what I mean? And black folks are like that to this day. You know what I mean?
Or the hags, you know, like sometimes you'd wake up at night and scream because me and my brothers, we slept in a bed together, and we slept in the same room with our grandparents. And some nights you'd wake up screaming because you felt like you were suffocating and you had to fight to come through. And they would say, well, you need to get on your stomach or get on your side because the hag is riding you. So what they do to keep the hag from bothering the children, they sprinkle salt and pepper around your bed. Because they said a hag was some evil person in the community who would take off their skin at night and come and ride the people. So to keep the hag from riding you, you put salt and pepper. Because without their skin, they couldn't cross the salt and pepper line to get to you. And you don't think of this when you were children. When I got older and started thinking, oh my God, these people, they were Africans to the core. It wasn't just the way they carried their wood on their head like they do in the continental dances we did, or the needle we used to sew the fishing net, or the fishing net we used, which was the same as theirs, and the manner in which we did it. All of those things I grew up in. When I went to Africa, it was like not leaving South Carolina, you know, when I saw what I saw.
Yeah.
And it made me remember all of these other things, the hag, the plat eyes, the Barabbas story my mama would tell. And we realized we had it, we never gave it up. It came in our minds and our DNA in our cells, and we practiced it under whatever disguise we had to survive in America, but we never gave up being Africans ever.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I want to remind people to subscribe to the Dr. Obed Shaka Show, contribute to the Weeds thing so that you can support people who are burned out in this Weeds fire. James has a limited amount of time left. I just wanted to end with one more comment and answer a few of these comments, and we're finished. James, W.B. Du Bois would talk about how on the plantation, the natural leader of Blacks was the Obia man or the diviner. And he said he was the healer of the sick, the comforter of the sorrowful, the natural leader of the masses of African people. And that was a person that people went to for any kind of direction. And that's part of what carried us through. There were a lot of other things that you've been describing as spirit beliefs and practices that we carry inside of ourselves. Can you make a little comment on that?
Well, everybody have themselves, you know. Before I started saying it out loud a few years ago, Mama always told us God in you, you know, God in you. And she tell one story. I got to do her story, and then you can really get it. One day I'm sitting on the porch after coming home from being in New York in the movement, and my cousins, a bunch of us was home, and there was a big church. But Mama didn't go to church. That's my grandma that day, the root lady. And so my cousin Chief comes from the church, Francis, and he's angry. He said, Mother Pigeon, Rev is wrong. Rev is up there cheating the people. He got a tree up there. It's called the money tree. And the people done put the money on. Rev is dancing and picking the money off the money. He said, Mother Pigeon, y'all got to say something. And Mama said, boy, sit down. He said, your man ain't going to church today. So you see man in church? He said, no, Mother Pigeon. She said, well, man never go to church on money tree day. And she said, you mean all these years? She said, never. The reason you never knew about the money tree because man never took you to church on money tree day. So she said, and then my Francis asked her, well, Mama, why didn't you go? He says, well, don't blame Reb. He said, because God said if you ain't put him there, he ain't going to come. So if you ain't put your money on the tree, Reb, he ain't coming for pick him. So, if you ain't put him there, he ain't going to come. So he said the people who put the money on the tree, they gave that to Reb. So you can't blame Reb for that. He said, man ain't put him money on the tree. If I ain't put him there, he ain't going to come and take my money. So, and you just listen to, here's an old lady, didn't read or write, When I tried to teach her after I came back home, she let me do about 2 lessons, but she sat me down. She said, baby, we work hard to make sure you and your brothers and sisters, you all go to school. He said, man, I ain't need to know that. That do the thing God gave me the power to do. And I send you. So when you listen to the wisdom, though, that came from them, when I was going away and she didn't know who Malcolm X was, and I said, I'm going to join Malcolm X's organization. He's been killed. I said, he's a beautiful man and they murdered him. I'm going to take over the organization and take the leadership. I hadn't met Ella yet. This was just my wanting to do. And she says, but why do you have to go? And I said, because somebody's got to go and do this. And then she did this prayer for me that she knew I would be in harm's way. And so she did this prayer and this blessing that no one will kill you if you don't let them do it through your mouth. I will protect the rest of you. That's real for people who don't understand. Trust me, I can tell you, that's the real blessing she put on me.
And all of us have protective spirits. And these protective spirits have guided us through. I was in Europe speaking in 2017, and a brother who was in the audience is from Suriname, and he's a gifted spirit medium. He could see the spirits around me that protect him. And I remember when I was in Ghana, and I was in a village in Ghana, and when the priest came up, when he came to me, he jumped back. And the guy said, you have these fierce spirits protecting you. And then he said, because the FBI and CIA tried to take me out 3 times. He said, oh, there were many other times, but your spirit told you to go to a different place. And you don't even know.
And other spiritual leaders around the world recognize these things. I'm in Mecca in 74. Me and Rodnell, Malcolm's nephew. And the people had not seen African American Muslims. So they took our passports. It was just floating around the airport. Everybody wanted to see it. So the intelligence people said, look, give us a day or so, we'll find your passports. So we're staying at Hodge Central. The second night, Roddy and I are standing having a Coca-Cola. And 3 men walks up out of the desert, dressed in white. Old men. One was younger than the others, big. And he came and they stood abreast us, and then the big one came and walked in front of us and brought his face right up to mine and jumped back and took a deep breath. And he did it again. And he jumped back. Now, I'm nervous as can be. This is my first time in overseas in Arabia. And so when he tried to do it a third time, I stuck my hand out and said, excuse me, sir. And he says, you speak English, but in a very broken English. I said, yes. He said, where are you from? So I wanted to get some strength. So I said, I'm from Harlem, New York. You know, figure, being from Harlem, everybody knows where Harlem is, right? But I was still scared. And the man looked at me and he pointed his finger and he says, you're going to be a great man someday. That scared me. And I said, I grabbed his hands and I said, sir, why are you saying this? Now, I'm the young, strong dude, right? He's the old dude, right? He pulled out of my clutch like I was a weak baby. That my knees buckled because I was strong then. I was a martial artist. I was into my thing. That man, it was just like I had no power.
Mm.
And then I begged. I said, please, sir, why are you saying these things to me? He says, when we get ready for you, we will come to you in your dreams. Then he turns around and he joins the other two and they walk off through the gate. I turned to Rodnell, this is Ella's son. I said, you know what that, he says, you hear what that N said? Because now I'm trying to find some strength, right? And he's drinking the Coke like he didn't even see what happened. So I says, Rodnell, did you hear him? I said, I'm going to go find him. So I run towards the gate and he yells to me, you'll never see him again. I never saw him again.
Mm-hmm. That was a spirit. It was a human being, but it was your time to get that message.
Yeah.
And we always have these connections, and it's nothing that's accidental. The idea of an accident is superstition because you can't explain why this happened. So
Right.
he was there to prepare you, to tell you down the road something's going to happen. Prepare yourself for it now. And he could see your spirit. He could see it.
I took on the Saudi government. I was arrested by the Central Intelligence at Chase Bank. I escaped from them in Jeddah and went and hid in Mecca for a week. I mean, but to me, it was all happening so fast. I wasn't thinking of nothing I was doing except I was doing what I was doing. And I remember when I got to Kennedy 3 weeks later, and the young man is searching my bag, and he asked me, why were you in Arabia? I said, I was on a Hajj. I said, I have diplomatic immunity. I'm an imam. And he blurts out, and the whole airport has him, why can't you be a good Christian like everybody else? So the big man came over to me and tells him, says, put Mr. Small's stuff back in his bag and send the bags on to Boston. And he calls me aside. He says, we've been watching you for the last 3 weeks. We know you were stealing food to eat. We know you had no money. We don't know how you got home, he says, because we blocked that pathway. But that was another spirit. That's when I learned spirits are real. But he said, this is the CIA, right? He reaches in his pocket and gives me $50 to buy some food. He gives me $50. He said, buy yourself some food, Mr. Small, and you get home safely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, those are spirits of Africa that are with you that keeps you going. So we're going to wrap up because James has got other things to do. This is one busy man. I just wanted to see if there were any comments here. Let's see. Krista Sampo taught in the schools. Okay. Let's see if that's Taiwan. Christopher Sampo, it has come out over the years that the mob did help with the missing civil rights workers. A man named Greg Scrappa, known as the Grim Reaper, a mob hitman, was sent by FBI down south to handle. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, we heard that after we made a decision to try to find out how could we were trying to figure out how to interface with the civil rights movement. And I think it was Paul that came up that there was something going around that someone did go. So we said, okay, we're going to make it happen then. We're going to get the Chin Gigantic character and the young hitman from that family and go down and jack up the Klan. And I thought they did a wonderful job.
Okay.
I never really heard that history before until that discussion. But there was such an incident when you see this coming episodes where we show the feds embedded in the numbers and drug movement, and Bumpy is interfacing with them until he found out that they're trying to kill Malcolm. And then we have to go after the feds. I can't tell you too much to save Malcolm. And then they want to hit Che Guevara because we got Malcolm and Che in a close relationship through a couple of episodes. And both of them making lengthy speeches, which is going to be nice. And to hear Che, I wanted to say freedom or death, but they got him to say freedom or homeland, freedom or homeland. That's as close to freedom or death as we can get. But we got the idea that Che is before he said venceremos, he said freedom of homeland, that all Cubans should understand they should be willing to say our homeland or death, our homeland or death.
Hmm. Hmm.
Get those concepts and ideas. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And again, you got to thank Chris Brancato. Chris is an extraordinary guy, extraordinary mind, extraordinary partner to work with. You know?
There's a question here by Afro Native World, Dr. Obdashaka Show. Bob, a question on that statement of Black people didn't embrace Christianity during slavery. When would you say that embrace indoctrination happened?
Well, it may not be as big an indoctrination as you think.
Exactly.
Even now, when you got to factor in a factor called Prince Hall Freemasonry, starting from the 1700s, and understand that is not a Masonic movement, but an African liberation movement couched in Masonry. And you won't really appreciate that until you realize David Walker comes from there, Richard Allen comes from there, Absalom Jones come from there, and on down the line. All of our great activists is coming out of that school. So one must then beg the question, what the hell is going on in this Prince Hall Lodge that is producing these kinds of characters, you know? And then you'll see that same thing happens when you get the AME Church and the AME Episcopal Church. You'll again see that leadership element that is building banks, that is building schools, that is building Black hospitals emerging from these institutions, right? And so by the time you get to the end of slavery in the chain form, you see the white community is trying to corral us mentally, but the Black community is saying, cool, we need a sanctuary. And the only sanctuary we had was that church. And the sanctuary being the place where you can go and be you and do you without interference from your enemies. So the church becomes the sanctuary to us. It may be the church to somebody, the onlooker, but out of that sanctuary comes the Knights of Pythias, the Odd Fellows, the Daughters of Ruth, the Eastern Stars, the Daughters of Isis. These are benevolent associations that's building and running the politics and the economic of the Black community for the sake of the Black community, building banks, building insurance company, building cabs company, building busing companies all across our communities across America. That's where this emanation is coming from. So if you don't really look at all of that and you're just thinking of the worship service and the use of the Bible, then you miss the African Americans' presence in the Black church as a phenomenon.
This point that Brother Smalls is making is extremely important because number one, the assumption is that we embraced Christianity during slavery, and then you had the Willie Lynch thing, which proves to be a myth. Blacks ain't falling for no scam. Yes, there was attempts to brainwash us, and yes, some of it worked, but for the most part, we brought in institutions. So what Brother Smalls is talking about here is the Prince Hall Masons was the African Lodge when he first brings it in. And the African Lodge is a secret society, but secret societies are coming in from Africa in many different forms. And there are huge West African secret societies. And these secret societies, the Loyal League is a major one. And so the Loyal League is a secret society in which David Walker belongs, in which Martin R. Delaney belonged. And so you had free men and women of color as well as men and women in enslavement. And what were the free African societies? Those were the societies, and this is the book I'm finishing on Seba right now. Those are the societies that continue traditional African institutions when colonialism comes in and slavery comes in and traditional African culture is under attack. So it goes into the bush. But that is where per Ankh the highest university system in ancient Kemet, House of Life, came from. It came from the secret societies, which are life, death, rebirth societies. So when Professor Smalls is talking about it may not have been as much of the brainwashing as you think in the Black church, here's why. Because Blacks are caught in a bind. See, this notion of they brainwashed us with Christianity, then that's assuming that your people are dumb. Why would they take on a so-called religion taught by people who are carrying out horrendous crimes against you when you're coming from a place where your spirit system is holy? You got to be pure. These people, they call them devils. So this is a point I made with you, James, before. There was an attempt to subvert Christianity made by the Irish. The Irish nearly did it, but what happened is the British and the Catholic Church ganged up on them. They were not successful. The African in America is the only one that actually took Christianity, dropped their own culture in it, not just spirit practices, the whole culture in it, and subverted it. We're the only ones that did it successfully. And therefore, out of that, what you find is all the other things that spring. So the Black church was, as Professor Small said, the one safe place where you could meet. This is a smart move on the part of your ancestors who don't have 1 acre, 1 mule, and they need somewhere to plan things and get things together. But the secret societies are really the basis for this. And these secret societies are the springboard for all the major institutions you build. And so we know of the ones that are coming up under the white systems. We subvert them, the Masonic orders and so forth. But then we create our own at the end of enslavement. That's because we're continuing what was going on before. And that's all over the Western Hemisphere. So what you're calling the brainwashing in the Black church, Blacks took this on and dropped their own stuff in it. When whites come down to convert us to Christianity, and Blacks, AME Blacks, who don't want us doing praise worship, who don't want us doing spirit possession, grassroots Blacks say, oh, no way we can worship God unless spirit comes down. They fought that battle and they won it. When the Mohawk Conference is called to brainwash us with their miseducation, one of the things they want to do is to create a new set of preachers. Why? Because you have the old elders who are the healers of the sick, the diviners, who become the first preachers in the Black church. My research shows that.
Absolutely.
And so they could not. So they wanted new elders trained at Fisk or somewhere. You know what I mean? That ain't gonna work, because if you ain't got some spirit in your, as the sisters would say, some gravy in your sermon and a message, or as Ray Richardson's husband, Julian Richardson, owner of Marcus Bookstore, used to say, you can't get Black people into motion unless they tap their feet and get you to think. And so these old elders, they were the ones representing us. That institution of elderhood was retained all over. It's been hit hard by drugs. It's still there.
The preacher is the chief. The preacher is the village chief.
Right.
He is the village head man.
Right.
He's the village healer. And he was chosen from the ranks of the community because of who he was.
Right.
The people who we call the deacon and the mothers of the church that surround, those are replicas of the same systems we had in Africa.
Right.
We now put those systems in the church.
Right.
And it worked.
And Krista Sampol has got this comment here. When Emperor Constantine took Christianity, the official religion of the Roman Empire, he started the trip of Christianity becoming a political instrument for the control of the population. But we weren't a part of that. And Black people have generally been the ones opposing war. Where does it come from? Black Christians, Blacks off the street, Black Muslims. It doesn't matter what their so-called religious orientation is, but we're not a part of the state system here. The state.
Let me show Brother Christopher something he should study, which will help offset that overbearing we put on Constantine. The Catholic Church, which becomes the epitome of the white way of looking at the thing, doesn't occur until 1,000 years after the but the African church in Egypt, what is it called? The Egyptian Orthodox Church. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is 500 years older than the Catholic Church and 1,000 years older than European Protestantism. And if you look at the Ethiopian church, what the Ethiopians do with what Constantine and them tries to form is the same thing we did with it in America.
Exactly.
You know? And
Exactly.
so when you study the Ethiopian church, you're like, oh my God.
And it
That's
raises
Alabama.
and
That's
it raises
Carolina.
the woman up to a high level. And
Yeah.
it was embraced voluntarily. It wasn't imposed on them, just as we embraced it for various reasons for our survival, but we dropped our own stuff in it. The essence of a real Black church is spirit.
Yes.
The role of the real Black church is raising the spirit. And this is a despiritualized system we're under. Do they believe in spirit? Hell no. You know what I mean? They believe in any logic that will put you under control. That's their thing. And the other thing is, these Blacks who dropped voodoo into the Black church, they didn't care about theology. They're not into theory.
Right.
They're into living what you believe, which is the spirit. And even those who are into theology now, they're mixed up because spirit comes first with Black folks. Spirit, you hear me? And that's God, the God within you. You know what I mean? So this is a whole different perspective. Now I know James got to go, but ain't this been some bad stuff here, folks? Huh? James, you got anything you want to conclude with?
Like I made a mistake earlier in my struggling to teach. I over-criticized and condemned the church. And I'm telling other scholars and other activists, you need to relook the history of the Black church.
Exactly.
We over-condemn, and people say, well, Steve said we over-condemned the Boule. We didn't understand what those gentlemen was trying to do. Even the sororities and fraternities on the campuses, they maybe have gone astray in the ignorance that new generations find themselves in. But let's understand what our ancestors' intents were. Intent is important to understanding historical activities.
Yeah.
And then you'll see why they designed certain institutions. We were calling ourselves African Americans in the 1700s. That wasn't something Jesse Jackson came up with.
Right.
T. Thomas Fortune and a bunch of ladies out of New York had created the Afro-American League in 1892. You know, so we never stopped calling ourselves Africans ever.
Right.
Matter of fact, the 20th century, we stopped for the beginning of the 20th century because of the socialization process imposed on us. But even then, we were struggling through it when the Negro thing and the color thing came as labeling.
Well put.
That's why history, will erase the mystery.
Yeah.
Dr. Noble said that. Study your history, erase the mystery, and work your Black magic.
Yeah. Yeah, well put. And I would say to fellow organizers, you can't be a good organizer if you haven't worked at the Black church. And that was one of the big mistakes of the Black Panther Party. They had a little support in the beginning, one reverend out there in the AME church, that supported them. But by and large, that was a mistake. And key thing is, in the beginning, when Blacks embraced Christianity, there's a lot of reasons why, right? First of all, we're spiritual people, but we need a house that gives us protection. So we pick the ones that match our culture, the ones that are democratic, you got to say so, all this kind of stuff. But also, our conception of why we were getting in that was part of the reason why is we believe that this deity here that we're taking on made a sacrifice for us. Guess what? That's African. And then in the first phases, when you're looking at the African who first forms the Black church, Jesus is an Orisha for them. That's how they see it. And in the beginning, it is straight out of Yoruba, Asante, and other cultures where Jesus is spitting out swords. You know what I mean? So, and it's a mixture of Old Testament with this, but it's African. And that's the belief they have. And then over time, we got these other things. But the fundamentals of why is it that Ella Baker made the comment that the Black church carries the aesthetics of the Black community? Beauty. You hear me? Yes, we got the ugliness now. We got the corporate churches. We got some of these preachers out here just for money. but you also have the liberation theology. I'm going to have a brother on here in a couple of weeks. His name is Reverend Bill Atkins. He has a black church in Memphis, Tennessee. And I met him in 1990 when I was traveling throughout the South, pushing my book, The Art of Leadership. It just come out. We took a car and we went through about 5 southern states. And he's got 80 members. And then he ended up with 10,000. Now he has 5,000. But he's done all kinds of things all over in Africa, all kinds of work you ain't heard about. So you got these black churches out here doing some positive stuff we know nothing about unless they're in our community.
Yeah. I'll close with this one thing, and then I do have to make a run. But the Deltas have done more Pan-African work, hospital building, well building, home buildings in Africa than all of the Pan-African revolutionary organizations put together. Okay?
Yeah.
Just think about that. And that's just one of the sororities that's doing work on the continent. When you are on those back roads, on the buses going all around Nigeria and Ghana, the one people you see is the busload of black church people who's building the clinics and digging the wells and so forth. And they're from South Carolina and New York and Memphis. And you're like, wow. They don't say I'm a Pan-Africanist. They don't say I'm an African revolutionist, but they're doing the same work we said an Pan-Africanist and revolutionists should do. So we have to rethink the question of our critique and how we make that critique.
Yeah. And know what's going on in our community and respect it and support it as well as what you're doing right now. So I want to thank you, brother.
Thank you, sir. And I've had fun. I always have fun when I'm with you because knowledge is such a beautiful medicine, that heals us. Even when we are teaching it, we're healing ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're my brother from another mother, for sure.
And
right on.
Here.
Yeah, so and tell your wife I said hello, and your grandchildren and children. Tell them
I will. Yeah.
Right on, brother. And I know you're busy.
Okay, my brothers.
And
peace and blessings. I'm going to go. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, make sure that you subscribe to the show. Make sure that you make the donation to the weed fund there so that it can help people in their rebuilding. Do that, okay? And that's it. So thanks, brother.
Peace and blessings. Thank you, sir. Hotep.